Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my YouTube channel, or welcome back. Thanks for viewing my video. In this video, I'm going to talk about the hardest books I've read. I watched a video by Pat at Book Chat with Pat, where she talked about the hardest books she read. She didn't do this as a tag, so I'm not going to do it as a tag either. I'm going to repeat what Pat said. This is a topic that was started as a tag by Paul at the Accidental Bookseller. Paul said in his video that he was talking about difficult books that he had read and that he did not choose any books that he had not finished, nor did he include any books that he simply didn't like or that he found to be boring. He was talking about genuinely challenging books. I've decided to talk about two kinds of difficulty in books. One type of difficulty is in the way that the book is written that makes it particularly challenging. The other type of difficulty is in the subject matter itself, which made the book very challenging for me to read. I'm going to do what Pat said. I'm first going to talk about the book was challenging because of the way it was written. The books I give are not super challenging because of that, but I did want to do this video the same way Pat did hers. So I selected 4 books. The first 2 books are Fourth Wing and Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. The reason these books were a little bit challenging to me is that they were written a little confusingly. I found that I had to look back more than I would like in these books. There was times I'd read something and it implied something had previously occurred and I didn't remember that. And I couldn't always find that it had previously occurred. So it was just because it was a little confusingly written. Now, I did like the books a lot. I rated them fairly highly. But they were both a little confusingly written. The third book is There by Tommy Orange. Reason this was difficult was because there were a lot of POVs, and those POVs were at different times. They go back and forth in time. So I just had trouble keeping track of all the POVs and all the different times the story was set in. This was another book that I liked a lot. I think I rated it 4 stars, but it was just a little difficult to follow for me because of that. Too many POVs, and add to that the different times that the characters were talking about made it difficult. The fourth book is Silver Leap by Danny Francis. This was difficult because the heroine in the book was written as she just made a lot of decisions that just didn't seem to make sense, and yet she always kind of came out okay after them. And there was a military training academy, and even though the society seemed to have really strict standards for things, the training academy, it seemed to be very loosely, security of it seemed very loose. So this was a book that I enjoyed overall, but it required a suspension of disbelief, and not a suspension of disbelief because of, say, fantasy elements or horror elements, something like that. A suspension of disbelief that some of the way it was written was just kind of hard to believe. Now I want to give some books that they're difficult, they're hard to read because of their subject matter, and these books were more actually, the subject matter did make it hard for me to read, and as opposed to the first category, it just made it a little difficult. The first is A Stranger by Albert Camus. Problem I had with this book is a couple things. The main character was just someone who kind of went through life and just kind of let it happen to him. But the main thing was he did something early on, took part in a crime that I just found very upsetting. And after that, I didn't like him. So it was difficult for me to read because of that. I think I rated it 3.5, which isn't bad, but just didn't like it the way a lot of people did. Second book is Still Just a Geek, an annotated collection of musings by Will Wheaton. Will Wheaton was most known for being in the Stand By Me movie and playing in playing Wesley Crusher in Star Trek The Next Generation. What made it hard to read for me is that his parents and brother treated him really badly. And ultimately, he had to just cut them off totally. Just couldn't deal with them anymore. The third book is Becoming Nicole, The Transformation of an American Family by Amy Ellis Nutt. This story was about a child who was biologically born male, but he knew at a young age that he was actually female, and it's about the process of transformation, how his family had to deal with it. What was difficult for me was that two things. One was that the way that people who opposed what Nicole was trying to do, how they used a child as like a political football, often very cruelly. And also that the book came out, I believe, in 2014. It ended on an optimistic tone. And at the time I read it a few years ago, I knew that the optimistic tone was not justified as far as like the future for trans people. And more recently, it's got even worse. So for those couple of reasons, it was a difficult read. The fourth book is Normal People by Sally Rooney. This was difficult to read because there was a couple in the book, and I consider their relationship very toxic. I didn't particularly like either character. A lot of people consider it a great romance, and I just don't see that. I just did not like their relationship. The fifth book is The Blackboard Jungle by Evan Hunter. This was difficult to read for the fact that it came out in 1955, so I must admit that. But the views that the men in the book had about women, I found abhorrent, and even for what was acceptable in 1955, I think they're kind of abhorrent. And also there was an essay that was fetishized, and for those reasons I found it difficult. Another book I rated over 3 stars. Ultimately I was glad I read it, but for those issues it was difficult to get through. And the final 3 books are ones I've read very recently. The first is Earthlings by Suyaka Murata. This was difficult to read because a lot of bad things happened to the main character, starting when she was 11. She was physically and verbally abused by her parents and older sister. She was essayed by a tutor, and she didn't feel like she fit into society, but it was set in Japan, I should say. And so the society was trying to push her into a role which she didn't want. It continued as she got older, and then she was actually hoping she was able to fit in, but just difficult to read for what she went through. The 8th book is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This book is set in the U.S. and society has decayed a lot, and there's an increasing difference between the haves and have-nots, and it's very brutal and it's very grim, and it's a great book, but it is hard to read because of those things. The final book is Playing Possum, How Animals Understand Death by Susanna Mansu. This book is especially difficult to read because the last chapter especially, there is considerable amount of animal deaths, and some of them are very brutal. And it's just, and there's other animal deaths in the book too, because it's necessary to provide the examples and evidence the author wants to provide, but it's just difficult to read the brutal deaths. As I said, I'm not going to tag anybody. Of course, if you'd like to do a video of your own, please do so. If you'd want to provide any answers in my comments, please do so too. If you can't think of anything else to comment, please add an emoji of your choice. I hope you're having a wonderful reading week. I hope you're having a wonderful week in general. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, please subscribe. Please hit the bell to get notified when I upload future videos.